All right, so today on Free Field Training, we're going to talk about private police.
Drop the car now!
Put your hands up here on the car. Up on the car. No, don't put them in your pockets. Hands up on the car. There you go. Right there. Now, this came up in a comment on another video that I did on police and sheriff's departments, the difference between the two. And Calvin Filippo asks, you mentioned private police. I mentioned it in passing in the video. How can we trust a law enforcement officer who works for a company, not the people? Well, here's the thing. The same way you trust a security guard, because that's basically what you're talking about when you're talking about private police. You're talking about a railroad or a community college that creates a police agency. They do that because they need their security to be covered under the same laws that the police are for some particular reason, right? In the case of the railroads, they're actually worried about terrorism. Like that's what's going on in their head, is that you could have somebody trying to derail a train. You could have somebody trying to, burgle a train, burgling guns or explosives out of trains. Like, everything is shipped through trains. Imagine what, blasting a hole in the side of a train that's moving crude oil or gasoline, the kind of damage and destruction that would cause. So they need to have police there. And it's either going to fall on that company to privately pay for that police, or it's going to fall on every jurisdiction along that line to police that line. And then you're going to have spotty protection for that train. Now, you move on to community colleges, and what they're worried about is interpersonal crimes. They're worried about cars getting burglarized in the parking lot, and they're worried about people getting hurt. They're worried about violence on campus, whether that be your active shooter type violence or, two people getting into a fight, and they want the security at their school to be able to provide the level of services that would be needed. Now, what you have to realize is that just because a security guard is given police powers by the state doesn't mean that that company that is paying them is going to allow them to do that. And anybody that goes to that level of training is going to learn that you have to follow policy, otherwise they cut the string and you're on your own. You're only indemnified if you're following company policy or agency policy if you're a security guard or a cop. Now, the other big difference is when you have somebody that's private police, they're basically private security for a company, but they're sent to way more training. Every state, and especially where I'm at, our armed security training, like for a guy to wear all the same stuff a police officer wears as a security guard, is 40 hours, right? And maybe a little bit more, like 8 hours of taser training, 8 hours of baton training, right? For a police officer, for community college, or not a community college, if a private college is going to have a police officer, it's 600 hours of just police academy training. And then on top of that, they have to have 8 hours a month of in-service training. And every year they have to redo training and they have to recertify things. Not so in the private security sector. So what you're getting when you interact with a private police officer is you're getting a security guard who is far better trained and far better protected legally than you are security. That costs a lot of money, and because it costs a lot of money, a lot of companies keep a very tight leash on what those people are allowed to do in the name of that company. A lot of the companies that are doing this are very large companies. In fact, the vast overwhelming majority of them are extremely large companies, railroads, colleges, things like that. And they're also organizations that are very, very liability conscious. I've had interactions with the railroad police where we caught somebody burgling a train car, and they said, well, we really can't even transport people. I've got a cage, I can put them back there, but only if local law enforcement requests my assistance transporting person. Now, this was on his arrest. It's his train, basically his arrest legally, but they don't arrest people. They go there, they detain whoever they can detain, and they hand it off to the local authorities. Local police handle the issue. They're very hands-off whenever they can. So if you're worried about trusting the private police, if it's a company that's a security company that happens to be in a state where they can make themselves the police by just sending their guys to a little extra training, or I know there's one state, I'll have to look it up later, where you can have a security company just call yourselves the police, because there was some law that said that, or some case law where the judges said, well, police is an activity, it's not a profession, it's not an identity, so you can just call yourself the police. But those are very, very few and far between. As far as I know, it's only one state that you're really allowed to do that. Put down in the comments below if you know otherwise, but every private police agency I've ever come in contact with has been a very large company, and it's been very, very tight leash on what their people actually can do. So if you think, how can you trust someone who's a police officer, a law enforcement officer that works for a private company? It's the same way you trust a security guard. If I was at the mall and I was getting robbed and then the guy ran away, I'd go find the nearest security guard I could, tell him to call 911. I'd say any different with the private police. I'd love to hear your experiences and comments on them. Those are just my experiences where I'm at. Very small snippet. I haven't had a lot of interaction with private police outside Illinois, so I can't tell you how it works everywhere. So throw some comments down below. Until next week, you guys be safe. Take care of each other. I'd like to thank all the Patreon supporters, and especially the shift supervisor level Patreon supporters that we have listed here. Your contributions are what allows free field training to continue on and become better. Thank you.